for your leadership in convening today's markup. It's a very ambitious agenda, and committee Republicans are prepared to support some of the bills that we're considering today. For example, I'm pleased that we're considering 3 bills that are intended to facilitate greater diversity and inclusion in publicly held companies. We've held a number of hearings, both at the full committee and in the Diversity and Inclusion Subcommittee, that focus on best practices in the private sector. We've heard from subject matter experts who guide companies, universities, and other institutions and organizations. The legislation introduced by Representatives Meeks, Maloney, and Beatty build on these hearings, and I look forward to supporting them. With respect to the housing bills on the agenda, committee Republicans are prepared to support all 3. 2 bills bring necessary reforms to the appraisal industry. The other addresses a critical issue for the most vulnerable in rural America. However, I want to focus my remaining time on the credit reporting bills. Today, we are considering 6 bills, all of which amend the Fair Credit Reporting Act in different ways. We'll consider a 7th bill at next week's markup, potentially. This committee has held 1 hearing on the topic of credit reporting, and that was back in February. And when I say on the topic, I say that in the loosest form possible, as the hearing was only with the CEOs of the 3 leading credit reporting agencies, not necessarily on the contents of reforming the Fair Credit Reporting Act. However, there was just 1 discussion draft of a bill attached with a hearing notice. Yet, this draft was not discussed once during the hearing, not once. Now, 6 months later, without further discussion, we're considering 7 bills that would make significant changes to the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Let me put my concern in context. As I described earlier, this committee and the Diversity and Inclusion Subcommittee held 4 hearings on the topic of diversity and inclusion. We heard from subject matter experts on what works and what doesn't. Today, we're considering 3 bills that are drafted based on what we've learned in those 4 hearings. That makes sense. Doesn't mean we get a fully bipartisan outcome, but it's laid the necessary foundation for moving legislation. But with respect to credit reporting, an issue of equal importance, we are throwing process and bipartisanship aside. During the February hearing, I made clear that I share, Chairwoman Waters, I share your concerns about credit reporting agencies and their oligopoly. I think we have bipartisan willingness to come to terms with amending and improving the Fair Credit Reporting Act. I have concerns about that oligopoly, their operations, that their operations should be more consumer-friendly, and there are aspects of the original discussion draft that I thought had merit and should be explored in greater detail. For example, I agree we should be disclosing public record data sources. We should exclude paid medically necessary medical debt from consumer credit reports. We should prohibit certain adverse information resulting from financial abuse or predatory lending. But I think those things need to be determined by a court of competent jurisdiction. And I think there are a lot of discussions we can have and serious debate about what goes into consumer credit reports. And in fact, I'll offer a substitute amendment that highlights the reforms I believe are needed for the industry. Reforms such as transferring the oversight of the industry, prohibiting the use of Social Security numbers to verify consumers, and facilitating online credit freezes and the removal of credit freezes for minors. We should be studying the use of non-traditional data and credit scoring, as well as codifying the CFPB's credit reporting registry. I believe this committee can report out a strong bipartisan product if we work together. The bills offered today do not advance that. In fact, they're just partisan bills slated to be marked up that make changes to a major piece of keystone legislation within our jurisdiction. So, Madam Chairwoman, I think we have several examples of strong bipartisan bills, and I hope we can take that same model across the fullness of our jurisdiction. I yield back.